What was the most messed up thing you saw in school? Story 1. The troubled kid had a panic attack because of a teacher. I think he had some issues at home. He was quiet, talked to no one. He always fought when people bothered him. He was something. Well, anyways, there was this teacher. She was really strict and got aggravated easily. Let's call her Mrs. Whale. We used to call her that. But she had asked him a question and he refused to answer. His head down, looking at his empty paper, the teacher exploded on him, telling him stuff like, "You will never be anything in life," and "Do your parents even love you?" He sat next to me, and I saw that he clenched his fists and started to shake. He tried to say something, but it all came out to be gibberish, because he broke down right there on his desk. No one really knew him, so we didn't know what to do. We all just sat there as the teacher kept on insulting him, not caring that he had started to shake. A nearby teacher heard all the commotion and came to check on us and saw it. She calmly talked to the still yelling Mrs. Whale outside as we just awkwardly sat there watching this kid break down. We did nothing. I really wish I would have done something, but I was frozen in place. After Mrs. Whale calmed down, the other teacher helped the kid out to the office. We never saw that kid and Mrs. Whale after that. They said Mrs. Whale had retired early, but I don't think so. Story 2. A girl was coming back from a doctor's appointment and wasn't there to hear that we couldn't get out equipment for recess. She opened the door, grabbed something, and went to leave. The wind kicked up and slammed the door on her hand, and she lost a finger. They rushed her to the hospital and sewed it back on. Eventually it was back to normal, but that was the most messed up thing I had seen. Story 3. Some kid stuck a pair of tweezers in an old outlet that didn't even have a circuit breaker, so I don't know how he's still alive. Story 4. Nothing that I personally saw at my high school was disturbingly messed up, just weird. Some kid smuggled in a bunch of onions and clogged all the downstairs toilets with them. Who does that? Story 5. A kid jumped over the balcony to try and beat the rush on mashed potato day. He broke both his legs, did not get his potatoes. Story 6. In kindergarten, there were 2 kids in my class that were cousins. They were just kind of dirty, physically I mean. No real regard for hygiene. Our school was made of concrete blocks, so the window sills were deep enough to sit in as a kid. In the bathroom, the window was way up high, like 2 feet from the ceiling. During the allotted class bathroom break, these 2 cousins would climb up the stall walls, sit on the super high windowsill, and dangle their feet. Then, the 16 other boys in our grade would line up like a firing squad and try to pee on their feet. It was a game. If you hit the lanky one's feet, you're doing okay. But if you hit the short one's feet, that's really something. The kids getting peed on loved it as much as we did. They invented the game. We did this every single day for a whole school year. 16 5-year-olds would line up and pee on the wall. Nobody ever said a word to us about it. Story 7. My middle school teacher did a thing where we could bring our pets to school. A kid in my class got attacked by a macaw after he tried to grab it off a desk so he could play with it, and had to go to the hospital to get stitches, and I was suspended and grounded for bringing a macaw to school. Story 8. A kid in my biology class accidentally hurt his own face with scissors. Then, another kid chased him out of the room with a microscope slide to catch a few drops of blood. So, he took his blood-covered slide and the teacher resignedly let us see the red blood cells still moving around. The kid that got hurt was fine. A few stitches and he was good to go. Story 9. In 7th grade, these 2 boys were about to get in a fight and started shoving each other, and one of them fell down and his arm just snapped. We all stopped in the hallway and stared at him, and the boy who broke his arm said, "What's everyone staring at?" He looked down and saw his arm and calmly said, "Oh, my arm is broken." Story 10. When I was a freshman, we had a problem with a gang in our school. They were mostly wannabe thugs who went around intimidating everyone else. Real low lives. Everyone hated them, but we were all afraid to do anything about it, because if you messed with one of them, you messed with all of them. Even teachers and administrators didn't want anything to do with them. Whatever punishments they handed down to them didn't faze them. They didn't care about school or graduating. So what effect does a suspension have? They only went to school in the first place because the law said they had to attend. So they basically had run off the whole school, tyrannizing everyone and everything in their path. One day, one of the lowlives picked a fight with a senior who was in show choir. The guy was one of the nicest guys you ever met. Normal in pretty much every way conceivable. Let's call him B for the sake of anonymity. B didn't provoke the lowlife, but the lowlife decided he had a problem with B. But instead of letting the lowlife punk him out, B squared up against him with a few well-placed punches, no formal martial arts education. B took down the lowlife, who had a wild, sloppy street fighting style. Everyone was stunned. The lowlife was humiliated, and that wasn't a good thing, because this now meant that B had a problem with everyone else in the gang. Amazingly though, instead of the standard suspension for fighting, the school administrators didn't do anything. They pretended like it never happened. They didn't even call him into the office or anything. B was already a hero to the rest of us. A legend. Sure enough, the gang began to harass B, calling him out in the hall, calling him gay for being in show choir, each taking their turn to provoke him to fight. A few days went by when the next toughest dude in the gang confronted B in the cafeteria, looking for a fight. He pushed B, who initially acted like he didn't want to fight, but when he pushed him again, sure enough, B squared up and with 2 punches knocked lowlife number 2 to the ground before the school security guard could break in to bust up the fight. The cafeteria was silent. Everyone was stunned. Once again, there were no repercussions for B. B had now taken out 2 of the 3 toughest guys in the gang. The rest were mostly wimpy little followers, who relegated their influence to heckling, who didn't pose any real threat, and would scatter like cockroaches whenever there was any threat of danger. Everyone knows that the toughest guy would come for B now. Let's call him J. It was just a matter of time. Again, a few more days went by before the final confrontation went down. I had the incredible fortune of being front and center for the last round. I was walking obliviously through the hall with my friend on the way to class when I heard Jay yell for B. B knew it was coming. Jay was a good 4 inches taller as well as 30 pounds heavier, mostly muscle, than B. It looked like a real-life David and Goliath, with the scrawny B just standing there, silent, just standing there and facing Jay. B dropped his books and it was on. Jay swung like a drunk wild animal, and B avoided most of the early throws. But Jay landed a lucky solid one that knocked B down. He popped up immediately, and when Jay went in for the final blow, B came through with an uppercut so solid that Jay's head snapped back and a stream of blood literally splattered across the wall next to him. Jay was down, but when he tried to get back up, he couldn't even stand. He staggered and fell back down. It was over. I stood there, right in front, and watched the whole thing. One of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed in my whole life. B, a normal, nice guy with no training or even prior fight history, single-handedly beating up the 3 biggest guys in the school. The gang was decimated, their street cred destroyed, by a scrawny dude from show choir. That was easily the most messed up thing I've ever saw in school. And it was beautiful. Story 11. A special needs kid stabbed another kid in the hand with a pencil. After the dude said his girlfriend that goes to another school wasn't real, pencil went straight through his hand and everything. Story 12. Middle school, in 8th grade Spanish class, there was a loud kid that couldn't keep his mouth shut. Anyway, one day he was being loud and my Spanish teacher says something along the lines of, "Okay, enough is enough," and pulls out a roll of duct tape. Before we all know it, she's wrapping it around his head and mouth. Never saw her again after that class. Her sweater even stayed on her chair for months. Story 13. I had a charming, young ASL teacher in my junior year. She was super cute and funny. Absolutely one of those teachers a lot of students crushed on. Her boyfriend was paralyzed from the waist down. Some accident when he was a teenager. The nature of his accident meant he might someday walk again, I guess, but he was still a ways off from that. He comes to visit the class one day, and our teacher insists he shows his progress toward learning to walk again. He clearly didn't want to, and at first, she came off as just kinda overbearingly supportive, but it escalated, and she flat out bullied him into pushing himself out of his wheelchair and taking a couple of fumbling steps before he fell over. And her laugh, like it was so shrill and cruel, and she didn't even bother helping him back into his chair until he asked. Story 14. In 2nd grade, this girl stapled her finger just to see if it was possible. It was very possible. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.